Danny Martinez had been driving the same bus route for 15 years. Every morning at 6, he climbed into the driver's seat of Route 47 and started his journey through New Seattle. The city had changed a lot since Earth joined the Galactic Coalition 5 years ago. Now, aliens walked the streets alongside humans, working in offices, shopping in stores, and riding his bus. Danny had seen all kinds of aliens during his years driving through the Galactic Quarter. There were the tall Kryn warriors with their dark armor and serious faces. There were the floating Etherians who drifted above their seats instead of sitting. There were the bug-like Chitauri who clicked and chirped to each other in their own language. Danny treated them all the same way he treated his human passengers. He said good morning, took their fare, and drove them where they needed to go. 6 months ago, a new passenger started riding his bus. She was an alien woman who barely reached Danny's waist. Her skin was pale blue, smooth, like porcelain. Her eyes were large and violet, taking up much of her small face. She had 3 fingers on each hand and moved with careful, quiet steps. Her name tag said Kira, and she worked as a translator at the Interspecies Commerce Building downtown. Every single morning, Kira boarded the bus at the same stop. She always wore simple clothes in gray or blue. She always sat in the same seat, 3rd row on the right side. She never caused any trouble. She paid her fare with exact change and gave Danny a small nod. Then she would sit quietly, looking out the window or reading something on her datapad. Danny noticed things about his regular passengers. It was part of the job. He noticed that old Mr. Chen always fell asleep and needed a wake-up call at his stop. He noticed that the college student Lisa always ran to catch the bus at the last second. It started small. Other passengers would sit in her seat, even though plenty of other seats were empty. When she politely asked them to move, they would look down at her and laugh. Some would move eventually. Others would ignore her completely, and she would just find another seat without complaining. Then there were the security contractors who worked in the same building as Kira. 3 of them rode the bus most mornings. The biggest one was named Craig. He had huge muscles and a loud voice that filled the whole bus. Craig and his friends thought they were funny. One Tuesday morning, Danny heard Craig talking to his buddies. They were laughing and pointing at Kira, who sat in her usual spot with her datapad. "Check out the paperweight," Craig said loudly. "How does something that small even have a job? What does she do? Hold down papers so they don't blow away." His friends laughed. One of them, a man named Pete, made his voice high and squeaky. "Oh no, I can't reach the top shelf. Someone help the tiny alien." They all thought this was hilarious. Danny glanced in his mirror at Kira. Her face showed no emotion. She didn't look at them. She didn't respond. She just kept reading her datapad, her small hands holding it steady. But Danny saw her fingers grip it a little tighter. This kind of thing happened every day. Not just from Craig and his friends, but from lots of people. Other aliens were just as bad as the humans. A massive Kryn warrior once almost stepped on Kira at the bus stop because he simply didn't see her. She had to jump out of the way quickly. The Kryn didn't even notice. He just boarded the bus like nothing happened. The Chitauri merchants were rude too. They would push past Kira to get on the bus first, their hard shells bumping into her and nearly knocking her down. They would click at her in their language, which Danny's translator earpiece told him meant things like, "Move aside, small one, and make way for your betters." Even the building management treated her poorly. Danny sometimes heard the other workers talking while they waited for the bus. A woman named Linda, who worked in administration, complained constantly about Kira. "I don't know why they hired her," Linda said one morning to her friend. "She probably can't even reach the filing cabinets, and her voice is so quiet in meetings that nobody can hear her. What a waste of a translator position. They should have hired someone more impressive." Danny found himself getting angry on Kira's behalf. He had a granddaughter about the same height as Kira, and he hated thinking about people treating his granddaughter this way. But Kira never complained. She never got angry. She never even seemed upset. She just went about her day with calm dignity, as if none of the mockery touched her. His grandmother used to say that still waters run deep. Danny started to think maybe that applied to Kira. There was something about the way she moved, the way she carried herself. It was hard to explain. She never rushed. She never seemed nervous or afraid, even when people were cruel to her. She just existed with this quiet confidence that Danny couldn't quite understand. On a Friday evening, 2 weeks after he first noticed the harassment, something strange happened. Danny had just dropped Kira off at her usual stop, near the apartment complexes, in the Galactic Quarter. He watched in his side mirror as she walked down the sidewalk, her small form easy to track among the crowds. A drunk man stumbled out of a bar and lurched directly into her path. He was big, over 6 feet tall, and weaving all over the sidewalk. Danny tensed, ready to see Kira get knocked over. The drunk man was moving fast, and Kira was so small. But then Danny blinked, and suddenly Kira wasn't where she had been. She was 3 feet to the left. The drunk man fell face first onto the concrete exactly where Kira had been standing. It happened so fast that Danny wasn't sure what he had seen. Had Kira jumped? Had she run? It didn't look like either of those things. It looked like she had simply flickered to a new position. Like a video that skipped a frame, the drunk man groaned on the ground. Kira kept walking as if nothing had happened. Her pace never changed. Her expression never changed. She just continued down the sidewalk and disappeared around a corner. Danny sat there for a moment, his bus idling at the curb. Had he really seen that? Or was he just tired after a long day of driving? He shook his head and pulled back into traffic. Probably nothing, just his eyes playing tricks on him. But that night, lying in bed, Danny couldn't stop thinking about it. The way Kira had moved, or not moved, or whatever that was. The way she never seemed bothered by anything. The way people treated her like she was weak and helpless. But she carried herself like someone who knew something they didn't. Still waters run deep, his grandmother always said. Danny wondered just how deep Kira's waters went. He had a feeling he might find out eventually. The Galactic Quarter had been tense lately. There were rumors of protests, of humans who didn't want aliens in their city. If trouble came, Danny hoped Kira would be somewhere safe. He had no idea that when trouble finally arrived, Kira would be the one keeping everyone else safe. 2 weeks passed, and the tension in New Seattle grew worse every day. Danny heard people talking on his bus about a group called Terra First. They were humans who believed aliens should leave Earth. They had been holding small protests around the city, but the protests were getting bigger and angrier. Many of Danny's alien passengers started traveling in groups now. The Etherians who used to float alone now moved in pairs. The Chitauri merchants clustered together, their usual confidence replaced by nervous clicking. Some aliens stopped taking public transportation completely. The buses were emptier than they had been in months, but Kira still rode alone. She still boarded at her same stop every morning. She still sat in her same seat. If she was worried about Terra First or the protests, she never showed it. Danny admired that about her, even if he thought she should be more careful. On Tuesday afternoon, Danny started his route through the Galactic Quarter toward the Commerce Building. It was 3 in the afternoon, and the bus was more crowded than usual. Several aliens were heading to work for the night shift. 3 Kryn warriors sat in the back, their armor taking up 2 seats each. 2 Aetherians floated near the middle. About a dozen human passengers sat scattered throughout, and Kira sat in her usual spot, reading her datapad. As the bus turned onto Commerce Street, Danny saw the crowd. At least 200 people filled the street in front of the building. They carried signs with angry messages. Earth for humans and aliens go home were 2 of the nicer ones. The crowd was shouting, and Danny could see some of them throwing rocks at the building's windows. Danny stopped the bus a block away. He picked up his radio and called for police. The dispatcher told him units were already on the way, but they were overwhelmed. The protest had grown much bigger than anyone expected. The dispatcher advised Danny to stay where he was and keep his passengers safe. Danny looked at his passengers in the mirror. The aliens looked frightened. The Etherians had stopped floating and were now pressed against their seats. Even the massive Kryn warriors looked tense, their hands moving toward their weapons. The human passengers looked uncertain, some sympathetic to the aliens, others uncomfortable. "Folks, we're going to wait here until the police clear the street," Danny announced. "Just stay calm and stay in your seats." For a few minutes, nothing happened. The protest continued down the block. Danny hoped the crowd would disperse soon. But then, a group of about 30 protesters broke away from the main crowd. They walked directly toward the bus. "Oh no," Danny muttered. He locked the door, but he knew that wouldn't help much if the crowd really wanted in. The protesters surrounded the bus. They started rocking it back and forth, making it sway on its wheels. They shouted insults at the aliens inside. They banged on the windows. Danny grabbed his radio again, trying to sound calmer than he felt. "Dispatch, I need help now. Protesters are attacking my bus. Units are coming, Danny. Hold on." But holding on became harder. Someone threw a brick through one of the windows. Glass exploded inward. A human passenger, an elderly woman named Margaret, screamed. Blood ran down her face where the glass had cut her. Other passengers ducked down, trying to avoid the broken glass. The Kryn warriors stood up. They were over 7 feet tall, and their armor made them look even bigger. One of them spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. "We will protect the passengers. Stay down." Danny knew what would happen if the Kryn fought. They were famous throughout the galaxy as incredible warriors. But they were also famous for not holding back. If the Kryn started fighting, people would die. Lots of people. "Wait," Danny called out. "The police are coming. Just wait." But the protesters weren't waiting. They were trying to tip the bus over now, more people joining in. The bus tilted dangerously to one side. Passengers screamed. Danny gripped his steering wheel, feeling helpless. Then a small voice cut through all the noise. It was quiet, but somehow, everyone on the bus heard it clearly. "Please remain seated. I will handle this." Danny looked in his mirror. Kira had stood up. She was putting her datapad carefully into her bag. She looked completely calm, as if they weren't surrounded by an angry mob trying to kill them. Craig, the security contractor who always mocked her, actually laughed. It was a nervous, disbelieving laugh. "You? What are you going to do? Ask them nicely to stop?" Kira didn't answer. She walked toward the front of the bus, her small feet making almost no sound. When she reached the door, she looked up at Danny. "Please open the door," she said. Danny stared at her. This tiny alien woman wanted to go outside into that mob. It was suicide. But something in her violet eyes made him trust her. His hand moved to the door controls before he could really think about what he was doing. The door hissed open. Kira stepped down onto the street. The protesters closest to the door looked down at her and started laughing. She looked so small, so harmless. One man actually bent down and tried to pat her on the head like she was a child. Kira stepped away from his hand without seeming to hurry. Then, she walked to the center of the crowd. The protesters moved aside, confused but amused. What could this little alien do? Kira stood perfectly still. When she spoke, her voice carried over all the shouting. Danny didn't understand how. She wasn't yelling, but somehow, everyone could hear her, perfectly. "I am Kira of Velthar. You have one opportunity to disperse peacefully." The protesters closest to her stopped laughing. Something in her tone made them nervous, but most of the crowd thought it was funny. A man pushed his way forward. He was huge, at least 6 feet tall and heavily muscled. He carried a metal pipe in one hand. "Go back to your own planet, freak," he snarled. He raised the pipe above his head, ready to swing it down at Kira. What happened next made Danny question whether he was really awake. Maybe he was dreaming. Maybe someone had drugged him. Because what he saw didn't make sense. Kira moved. But moved wasn't the right word. 1 second she was standing still. The next second, the man with the pipe was on the ground, gasping for air. The pipe lay next to him, bent in half like someone had folded a piece of paper. Kira's small hand rested gently on the man's chest. She wasn't pushing. She was just touching him, but he couldn't move at all. His eyes were wide with shock and pain. Veltharians evolved on a planet with gravity 8 times that of Earth, Kira said. She still sounded calm, like she was teaching a class. Our physical strength is proportional to our size. Every movement I make in Earth's gravity requires conscious restraint. I am holding back at all times. The crowd had gone completely silent. They stared at Kira, not understanding what they were seeing. Then someone pulled out a gun. Danny shouted a warning, but he was too far away. The man fired directly at Kira from maybe 10 feet away. Kira's hand blurred. Suddenly, she was holding something between 2 fingers. It took Danny a moment to realize what it was. A bullet. She had caught the bullet while it was flying through the air. "This is a warning," Kira said, still in that same calm voice. "Leave. Now." But about 20 protesters decided to rush her all at once. Maybe they thought their numbers would help. Maybe they were too angry to think clearly. Whatever the reason, they charged at the small alien woman. What followed wasn't really a fight. Kira didn't punch anyone. She didn't kick anyone. She just touched them. Light taps with her small fingers. But each tap sent a grown man flying backward like he had been hit by a car. One protester tried to tackle her from behind. Kira didn't even turn around. She just reached back and flicked one finger against his forehead. The man's eyes rolled back and he collapsed, unconscious before he hit the ground. Another tried to grab her arm. Kira let him. He pulled as hard as he could, his face turning red with effort. Kira didn't budge. She looked down at her arm, then at the man, then simply twisted her wrist slightly. The man yelped in pain and let go, stumbling away. When Kira stepped forward, small cracks appeared in the concrete under her feet. When someone swung at her, she swayed slightly, and the fist passed through empty air. When someone tried to surround her, she was suddenly somewhere else, moving faster than Danny's eyes could track. 30 seconds. That was all it took. 20 attackers lay on the ground, groaning. None of them looked seriously hurt, but all of them were completely unable to fight. Kira stood in the middle of them, not even breathing hard. Her expression hadn't changed. She still looked polite and calm. The rest of the protesters backed away. Fear replaced anger on their faces. They had just watched a 3-foot-tall alien woman defeat 20 of their friends without breaking a sweat. Inside the bus, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The Kryn warriors stared at Kira with something that looked like respect. Craig had gone pale white. His mouth hung open. Danny pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He did a search for Velthar. The results loaded, and Danny felt his blood turn cold. Velthar. Classification: Apex Predator Species. Galactic Combat Rating: Class 7. Class 7. The same rating as the Kryn warriors. The same rating as species that could fight off entire armies alone. And Kira had been quietly riding his bus for 6 months. The remaining protesters ran. They scattered in every direction, abandoning their friends who lay groaning on the ground. Kira watched them go with the same calm expression she always wore. She didn't chase them. She didn't threaten them. She just stood there, waiting. Police cars arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the sudden quiet. Regular human police came first, followed by Galactic Coalition peacekeepers in their distinctive blue armor. Danny watched as a police captain climbed out of his car and walked very carefully toward Kira. "Ma'am," the captain said, his voice respectful but nervous. "I'm Captain Rodriguez. We're going to need you to come to the station to give a statement. Kira nodded. Of course, Captain. I understand protocol. There are also regulations about apex predators using force in civilian areas, Rodriguez continued. He looked uncomfortable saying it. I am aware, Kira said. I operated within civilian defense parameters. No permanent harm was inflicted, and I responded only to immediate, lethal threat. The Coalition Legal Code Section 7.3 permits defensive action under these circumstances. Rodriguez looked relieved. Yes, ma'am. I will provide it willingly, Kira said. But first, I must retrieve my belongings from the bus. She walked back toward the bus. The protesters on the ground groaned and tried to crawl away from her. She paid them no attention. When she reached the bus door, Danny opened it without being asked. His hands were still shaking. Every passenger stared at Kira as she walked down the aisle. The fear was obvious on their faces. Even the Kryn warriors watched her with wide eyes. She had defeated 20 armed humans in seconds. What else could she do? Craig stood up as she approached her seat. His face was pale and sweating. Ma'am, I need to say something. Kira stopped and looked up at him. She had to tilt her head back quite far. Craig was over 6 feet tall. I owe you an apology, Craig said. His voice shook a little. Several apologies. I've been disrespectful to you every single day. I mocked you. I made fun of your size. And you just saved all our lives. The other security contractors nodded from their seats. Pete, who had made fun of Kira's voice, looked ashamed. Kira studied Craig for a moment. You judged me by my appearance, rather than my capabilities. This is a common failing among many species, humans included. I took no offense because I understood you lacked information. Now you have that information. What you do with it defines your character. Craig sat down slowly. He looked like he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Kira collected her bag and datapad from her seat. As she turned to leave, Danny stood up. Miss Kira, wait, he said. She paused and looked at him with those large violet eyes. Why? Danny asked. Why do you let people treat you that way? You could command respect just by telling people what you are. You could show them what you can do. But you don't. Why? Kira's expression softened just a little. It was the first real emotion Danny had seen on her face. My people learned long ago that fear is not the same as respect. We are powerful. Yes. But power means nothing without purpose. I came to Earth to build bridges between species, not to intimidate. She paused, then continued. If I announced my capabilities, humans would treat me differently. But not because they respected me. They would defer to me out of fear. Fear breeds resentment. Resentment breeds conflict. I did not come here to create more conflict. Danny thought about that. You've been testing us, haven't you? Humanity, I mean. Testing? No, Kira said. She tilted her head slightly, a gesture that reminded Danny of a curious bird. Observing. Learning. Your species is young in galactic terms. You are still learning how to coexist with others who are different from you. How you treat those you perceive as weak tells me more about your species' character than how you treat those you perceive as strong. And what have you learned? One of the Kryn warriors asked from the back of the bus. His deep voice rumbled through the space. Kira turned to look at him. I have learned that humanity is capable of great cruelty and great kindness, often in the same individual. You are impulsive, quick to judge, and slow to change your minds. But when you do change, when you recognize your errors, you can grow remarkably fast. She glanced around at all the passengers. Today, you saw me use force. But you should know that in the 6 months I have been on Earth, this is the first time I have done so. 6 months of mockery, 6 months of dismissal, 6 months of being treated as less than others. I endured it all, without response because I wanted to understand how humans treat those they see as powerless. That seems cruel to yourself, Margaret said. The elderly woman had a bandage on her forehead where the glass had cut her. Why put yourself through that? Because it matters, Kira said simply. The Galactic Coalition has rules about new member species. We must assess whether they are ready for full integration, whether they will be good partners, or whether they will bring conflict and violence to the wider galaxy. I am one of the observers assigned to make that assessment. The bus went very quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. Kira had been judging whether humanity deserved to stay in the Galactic Coalition. 1, 2, and what's your assessment? Danny asked quietly. Kira was quiet for a moment. Still forming. But today gives me hope. The protesters learned something important. They learned that strength comes in unexpected forms. They learned that their assumptions about power were wrong. More importantly, many of them will remember that I could have killed them easily, but I chose not to. That choice, that restraint, may teach them more than violence ever could. She turned to leave, then looked back at Danny. You, Danny Martinez, treat me the same way you treat everyone on your bus, with basic courtesy and dignity. You did not know what I was. You had no reason to treat me well except that you are a decent person who respects others. That is more valuable than any amount of fear-based respect. With that, Kira left the bus. The police waited for her outside. Danny watched through his windshield as Captain Rodriguez escorted her to a police car. She got in the back seat, so small that she had to climb up into it. The other passengers began to talk all at once. The Kryn warriors spoke in their own language. But Danny's earpiece translator caught phrases like impressive warrior and unexpected strength. The human passengers were equally amazed. Craig looked at his hands. I can't believe I made fun of her. For 6 months. And she could have turned me into paste at any moment. She wanted us to underestimate her, Pete said. She wanted to see how we would act. And we failed, Craig said bitterly. We treated her like garbage. But she still saved us, Margaret pointed out. Even though we were awful to her, she still protected us when we needed help. Danny thought about that. It was true. Kira had every reason to let the protesters hurt the people who mocked her every day. But she hadn't. She had defended them without hesitation. The news crews arrived while Danny was still sitting there. Reporters poured out of vans, setting up cameras and interviewing witnesses. One of them managed to get to the police station fast enough to catch Kira as she finished her statement. That evening, Danny watched the interview on his apartment television. The reporter was a young man named Kevin. He looked nervous sitting across from Kira. The public database has very little information about your species, Kevin said. Can you tell us more about Velthar? Kira nodded. Velthar is what you would call a death world. The gravity is 8 times that of Earth. The native predators would kill most sapient species within minutes. The environmental conditions require constant adaptation. My people evolved to survive in conditions that would be lethal to most beings in the galaxy. So why do Veltharians choose civilian roles in the coalition? Kevin asked. With your abilities, you could be warriors, enforcers, soldiers. That is precisely why we do not, Kira said. My people have seen what happens when strength is valued above wisdom. We nearly destroyed ourselves in ancient wars. We survived by learning that true power lies not in domination, but in protection, in building, rather than destroying. Kevin leaned forward. But you're working as a translator. Isn't that a waste of your abilities? Is it? Kira asked. Language builds understanding. Understanding prevents conflicts. I prevent more violence with words than I ever could with force. Today was necessary, but it was also a failure. I had to resort to violence because communication had broken down. That seems like an excellent use of my abilities. The interview continued, but Danny stopped paying attention. He thought about Kira sitting on his bus every day, enduring mockery and dismissal, all to observe humanity, to judge whether they deserved their place in the galaxy. He wondered what she would report to her superiors. He wondered if humanity had passed her test or failed it. Most of all, he wondered if Kira would still ride his bus tomorrow morning, or if she would request a transfer away from the species that had treated her so poorly. Danny fell asleep thinking about still waters running deep, and about how much courage it took to be kind when you had the power to be terrible. 1 month passed. Life on Route 47 changed in ways both big and small. Kira still rode the bus every morning, still boarded at the same stop, still sat in the same seat, but everything else was different. Now when she got on the bus, people stood up and offered her their seats, even though hers was empty. She always declined politely and sat where she always had. Passengers greeted her respectfully. Some asked her questions about Velthar. Others thanked her for what she had done. A few still looked at her with fear, but it was respectful fear, not the dismissive mockery from before. Danny noticed changes beyond his bus, too. The Terra First movement had collapsed completely. Their leaders were in jail, facing serious criminal charges. The protests had stopped. More importantly, Danny saw humans treating all aliens better now. The casual rudeness was mostly gone. People held doors open for Chitauri merchants. They gave Etherians space to float. They spoke respectfully to everyone, regardless of size or appearance. It was as if Kira's demonstration had opened people's eyes. They realized they had been judging beings by their appearance, making assumptions about power and worth based on size and looks, and they realized how wrong those assumptions could be. Craig, the security contractor who had mocked Kira for months, now worked directly with her at the Commerce Building. He had requested a transfer to her department. Danny had overheard him talking to Pete on the bus one morning. "She's teaching me about different species customs," Craig said. "Did you know that looking directly at a Chitauri's eyes is considered a threat? I've been doing it wrong for 2 years. No wonder, they always seemed hostile." "Is she still upset with you?" Pete asked. "For how you treated her?" Craig shook his head. "She says she was never upset. She understood that I didn't have the information I needed to make good judgments. Now that I have that information, she expects me to do better. It's like she doesn't hold grudges at all." "My land. I was lated, Sile. She expects me. That's more mercy than I'd show," Pete muttered. Danny drove and listened. Kira sat in her usual seat, reading her data pad as always. If she heard the conversation, she didn't show it. The video of Kira stopping the protesters had gone viral across not just Earth, but the entire Galactic Coalition. Danny had watched it online dozens of times. Someone in a nearby building had filmed the whole thing. Watching it was surreal. Kira moved so fast that the camera could barely track her. She looked like a blur of blue and gray, appearing and disappearing around the protesters. Other Veltharians had come forward after the video spread. There were only about 40 of them on Earth, Danny learned. They all worked in civilian jobs like Kira: translators, teachers, counselors, mediators. Now everyone understood why. The Veltharians weren't just strong, they were wise. They used their power to protect and teach, not to dominate and control. But not everyone in the galaxy had learned that lesson. On a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the incident, Danny picked up new passengers at the Commerce Building stop. They were Gordal, a species Danny had only seen a few times before. They were massive, easily over 7 feet tall, and almost as wide. They looked like walking tanks, with thick gray skin that resembled armor plating. Their faces were brutish, with small eyes and large mouths full of flat, grinding teeth. The Gordal Confederation had a reputation. They controlled several important trade routes through their sector of space. The Galactic Coalition tolerated them because trade was important. But everyone knew the Gordal respected only one thing: strength. They had conquered 17 planets over the last century. They saw diplomacy as weakness and kindness as stupidity. These 3 Gordal climbed onto the bus and immediately filled the aisle. They didn't sit down. They just stood there, blocking everyone else. Other passengers pressed against the windows, trying to give them space. The Gordel looked around with expressions that Danny's translator told him meant contempt and amusement. One of them spotted Kira in her usual seat. He said something in Gordel language. Danny's earpiece translated it. "Look, a Veltharian." The tiny ones that claimed to be dangerous. The other two Gordal made a sound like snorting. Danny's translator identified it as Gordal laughter. The largest Gordal walked down the aisle toward Kira. His heavy footsteps made the bus shake. He leaned down, his massive face coming close to hers. When he spoke, his breath probably smelled terrible, though Kira's face showed no reaction. "I have heard tales about your species," the Gordal said in heavily accented English. "Tiny creatures who claim to be mighty warriors. Propaganda. Yes? Veltharians hide behind coalition protection. You are too small to be dangerous." Kira looked up from her datapad. She marked her place carefully before responding. The Gordal Confederation. Known for expansionist policies and aggressive negotiation tactics. You have conquered 17 worlds in the last century. Please, take your seats. The bus is about to depart. Her tone was perfectly polite. She could have been asking them to pass the salt at dinner. The Gordal leader made that snorting laugh sound again. "You do not command, Gordal. We take what we want. We do not ask permission. We know." He reached down with one huge hand, as if to grab Kira. The other passengers tensed. Craig half stood from his seat, but Danny saw fear on his face. The Kryn warriors in the back shifted, ready to intervene. Kira sighed. It was a very human gesture, one Danny had never seen her make before. "I understand that in Gordal culture, direct challenges must be answered. Very well. You wish to test if the stories are true. I will demonstrate once. Pay attention." She stood up, barely reaching the Gordal's chest. The size difference was almost comical. The Gordal probably weighed 5 times what Kira did. He had muscles on his muscles. His skin looked thick enough to stop bullets. "You mock me because I am small," Kira said calmly. "This is a failure of logic. Size determines strength only within a species. Between species, evolutionary environment matters more." She reached out with one small, 3-fingered hand. She placed it flat against the Gordal's chest. The Gordal evolved on a world with 0.7 Earth gravity. I evolved on a world with 8 times Earth gravity. Do you understand what this means? Way. The Gordal tried to push her hand away. His arm muscles bulged with effort. Kira's arm didn't move at all. The Gordal pushed harder. Nothing happened. He might as well have been pushing against a steel wall bolted to the ground. Then Kira started walking forward. Her hand stayed flat against the Gordal's chest. The massive alien tried to stand his ground. His feet slid backward across the bus floor, leaving long scuff marks in the rubber. He leaned back, using all his weight. It didn't matter. Kira walked steadily forward, and the Gordal slid backward, helpless despite his size and strength. When she reached the bus door, Kira removed her hand. The Gordal staggered, breathing hard. His small eyes were wide with shock. In physics terms, I am operating with a mechanical advantage of roughly 11 to 1 over you, Kira explained. Her tone remained calm and educational. This is not a boast. This is mathematics. Your strength is impressive on low-gravity worlds. But here, in standard Earth gravity, I am much stronger than you. She looked at the other two Gordal, who had stopped laughing. Your confederation conquered worlds because you were stronger than those you invaded. But there are always stronger beings. The question is not whether you can be defeated. The question is whether you are wise enough to choose cooperation over conquest. The Gordal leader stared at her. Danny could see his mind working behind those small eyes. Finally, the Gordal made a gesture with his hands, crossing them over his chest and bowing his head slightly. The stories were insufficient, he said. His tone had changed completely. The mockery was gone. You are not just strong, you are disciplined. Control over great strength is more impressive than the strength itself. Discipline is strength. Kira agreed. Now, please take your seats. I believe you have negotiations to attend at the Commerce Building. Being late would be disrespectful to your hosts. The three Gordle sat down without another word. For the rest of the ride, they watched Kira with expressions that Danny recognized as professional interest. They weren't afraid of her. They respected her. That was the difference. When they reached the Commerce Building stop, the Gordle stood to leave. The leader paused, next to Kira's seat. We will inform our confederation about the Veltharians, he said. The truth, not the rumors. You are worthy of respect. Thank you, Kira said simply. I hope your negotiations are successful. The Gordle left. The bus felt much larger without them. Danny pulled away from the curb, his mind racing. He had just watched Kira casually overpower a being that could probably lift a car, and she had done it without breaking a sweat, without even seeming to try very hard. He called out, Kira, can I ask you something? She looked up toward the front of the bus. Of course, Danny. Why do you keep riding the bus? You could probably run faster than the bus moves. You could jump from building to building if you wanted. Why do you keep doing this? Kira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I ride the bus because that is what integration means. Not separation. Not elevation above others. Simply existing alongside them, sharing the same spaces, the same experiences. Kira continued speaking from her seat. If I used my abilities to separate myself from ordinary life, I would learn nothing about the people I hope to understand. I would become isolated, remote. How can I help build bridges if I stand apart from those I wish to connect? Danny drove in silence for a moment, thinking about that. I am an observer, Kira admitted. My government sends Veltharians to new coalition members to assess their potential. Not their military potential, their cultural potential, whether they will grow into wise partners or remain trapped in cycles of fear and aggression. And what's your assessment of humanity? Danny asked. Kira smiled. It was small, but it was there. Still forming. But today's incident gives me hope. The Gordle learned something important. They learned it because they saw power combined with restraint. That is a lesson humanity is also learning. She looked around at the other passengers, who were pretending not to listen while obviously listening. You are young as a species. Impulsive. Often foolish. But you are also capable of remarkable growth when given proper examples. That is valuable. Craig spoke up from his seat. So, when do you send your report? When do you tell the coalition whether we pass or fail? I have been sending reports every month, Kira said. My assessment has been evolving. At first, I was concerned. The casual cruelty, the quick judgments, the violence that simmered beneath your civilization. But I have also seen change. I have seen people like Danny, who treat everyone with basic dignity. I have seen people like you, Craig, who recognized their mistakes and worked to correct them. She paused, then added, Besides, I have grown fond of Route 47. The coffee cart at my stop has finally learned how I prefer my beverage. That counts for something. The passengers laughed. It was a warm sound, not mocking. Danny realized that somewhere along the way, Kira had stopped being the weird alien and had become part of their community. She was their Kira now. Not just some random Veltharian. 6 months passed. Winter turned to spring, and spring moved toward summer. Earth's acceptance into the Galactic Coalition became permanent. The final vote was unanimous. Every member species agreed that humanity had demonstrated enough growth to remain. Danny heard through his friend Lisa, who worked at a news station, that the official assessment reports had mentioned the incident in New Seattle. Specifically, they mentioned how humans had responded after seeing Kira's demonstration. Not with more fear and violence, but with reflection and change. That response had apparently impressed many coalition members. Life settled into a new normal. More aliens moved to Earth. More humans moved to other coalition worlds. The Galactic Quarter expanded into neighboring districts. Trade increased. Cultural exchange programs flourished. And Route 47 remained the main bus line through it all. Kira still rode every morning. She had been promoted to senior liaison. Whatever that meant. She had her own office now. Apparently, quite nice. But she turned down the private vehicle that came with the position. She preferred the bus. She said. It kept her grounded. Danny understood. The bus was real life. Real people going to real jobs, having real problems, and real joys. It was easy to forget that when you got isolated in fancy offices with private transportation, Kira stayed connected by staying ordinary. One morning in late June, an old woman got on the bus at the Commerce Building stop. She was human, maybe 70 years old, and she struggled with 2 heavy bags. Danny waited patiently while she fumbled for her fare. Kira stood up from her seat. She walked over and picked up both bags effortlessly, though they probably weighed 50 pounds each. Please, allow me to help. Where are you sitting? The old woman looked startled, then grateful. Oh, thank you, dear. That's very kind. Just over there is fine. Kira carried the bags to the woman's seat and placed them gently on the floor. The old woman thanked her again, then looked more closely at Kira's face. You're that Veltharian from the news, aren't you? The one who stopped those protesters? Yes, Kira said simply. Well, thank you for that too, the woman said. My grandson is half Etherian. His father is one of them floating folk. I was worried sick about him during all that business with Terra First. What you did, standing up for everyone like that, it meant a lot to folks like me. Kira nodded. Your grandson is fortunate to have you. Family bonds that cross species lines will be important for humanity's future. One. The old woman smiled. He's a good boy. Floats around my kitchen helping me cook. Can reach the high shelves I can't get to anymore. Kira returned to her seat. Danny watched the exchange in his mirror and felt something warm in his chest. This was what integration really looked like. Not grand speeches or official ceremonies. Just small moments of kindness between different beings, helping each other through ordinary days. The months continued to pass. Fall came, then winter again. Danny celebrated his 55th birthday. His daughter threw him a party and invited some of his regular passengers as a surprise. Kira came, bringing a gift from Velthar. It was a small stone that supposedly never got cold, no matter what temperature the air was. Danny kept it on his dashboard after that. Craig got married. His fiancée was a Chitauri merchant he had met while working with Kira. The wedding was a strange blend of human and Chitauri customs. But it worked. Kira attended and gave a speech about how love was perhaps the most universal language in the galaxy. Danny had never seen Craig look happier. More Veltharians came to Earth, as humanity proved itself worthy of full coalition membership. They took various jobs, always in civilian roles. Teachers, counselors, mediators, engineers. Wherever they went, they improved things. Not through force or intimidation, but through quiet competence and wisdom. Danny learned that there were only about 5,000 Veltharians in the entire galaxy. Their planet had a small population compared to most species. They didn't reproduce quickly, but they lived long lives. Sometimes over 300 years. Kira was apparently only 62 years old, which was young for her people. Does that mean you'll be riding my bus for the next 200 years? Danny joked one morning. Perhaps, Kira said with that small smile she had learned. Although you will likely retire before then. Who knows what future bus driver will inherit me as a passenger? They'll be lucky to have you, Danny said sincerely. And I will be fortunate to have them, if they treat me half as well as you have. 1 year after the protest incident, a reporter named Kevin requested to do a follow-up interview with Kira. He came on the bus to film her during her normal commute. Danny gave permission, Curious about what she would say, Kevin asked her about the changes she had seen in humanity over the past year. Kira thought carefully before answering. Humanity is learning, she said. Learning that strength comes in many forms. Learning that different does not mean lesser. Learning that wisdom is more valuable than power. These are lessons some species take centuries to learn. Humanity is learning them in years. That is impressive. Their quarter. Do you think humans will ever be as peaceful as the Veltharians? Kevin asked. Kira tilted her head. Peaceful? My people are not peaceful. We are capable of terrible violence. We simply choose not to use it, except when absolutely necessary. That choice, made every day, is what defines us. I hope humanity learns to make that same choice. And do you think they will? I believe they will, Kira said, because I have seen it happen already. I have seen humans choose kindness over cruelty. I have seen them choose understanding over fear. I have seen them grow and change. That gives me hope, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The interview aired that evening. It was shared millions of times across Earth and the Coalition. The image of Kira sitting on a regular bus, talking about hope and growth, became something of a symbol. This tiny alien who could break steel with her bare hands, choosing to ride public transportation and work for peace. 2 years after the incident, Danny finally decided to retire. He was 57, and his back hurt more than it used to. His daughter had grandkids now, and he wanted to spend time with them. His last day of driving Route 47 was on a Friday in March. The bus company threw him a small party at the depot. Many of his regular passengers came. The Kryn warriors brought traditional battle cakes, which were apparently an honor gift. The Etherian diplomats sang a farewell song in their whistling language. Craig and his wife gave him a photo album filled with pictures from the bus over the years, and Kira gave him a letter, handwritten on real paper, which was apparently important on Velthar. Danny read it that night at home. Danny Martinez, it began. You treated me with dignity when you had no reason to. You opened the door when I asked. Trusting me, though you did not understand. You showed me that humanity, at its best, is kind without calculation and decent without expectation of reward. My reports to Velthar and the Coalition have been favorable, largely because of humans like you. Thank you for your service to all beings. May your retirement be long and joyful. It was signed with her name in both English and the flowing script of Veltharian writing. Danny kept that letter on his wall. Whenever people asked him about his years driving through the Galactic Quarter, about the day he saw a tiny alien woman defeat 20 attackers, he would point to that letter. That's what it was all about, he would say. Not the fighting, not the demonstrations of power. It was about basic decency, treating people right, no matter who they are or what they look like. That's what Kira was testing. And I like to think we passed. The new driver for Route 47 was a young woman named Beth. On her first day, Kira boarded at the usual stop and sat in her usual seat. When Beth asked if she was the famous Veltharian from the news, Kira simply smiled and said, I am a passenger who enjoys riding the bus. The rest is not important. And so life continued on Route 47. Different driver, same route, same passengers. Kira still rode every morning. She still helped old ladies with their bags. She still answered questions about Velthar patiently. She still demonstrated, every single day, that true strength was not about domination, but about choosing kindness when you had the power to choose otherwise. And humanity, slowly but surely, was learning that lesson too.